Hi everyone and welcome back to part 31. So in this video we are going to see how we can send one-to-one messages. Okay, so here I'm going to give you a demonstration first of all. Okay, so I have two users open up, user 1 and user 2 here. Okay, so now I'm going to just select the chat, okay, in both of my windows, and then I'm just going to exchange some of the messages. So after I send that message, okay, it immediately appeared here, okay, and here as well. Now if the second user, let's say, send some messages, here I'm going to just send some emoji, okay, then if I click on the send button, then you can see it is sent immediately. Similarly, we can also send link messages here, okay, so if I just type a link here, let's say http youtube.com, okay, then that will be recognized as a link, okay. So as you can see here, we are getting link, then it is going to be opened up in a new tab. So let's now pick up where we left off in the last video. So as you might remember, if you go back to your server.js file on backend, okay, and see this start conversation event, okay, then you can see we emitted these two events, start chat and open chat, okay. So let's actually make a small change here. Instead of emitting two different events, since we are basically passing the same payload here, okay, that is the conversation document, so that is why I'm just going to make these events same, okay. That means same event will be emitted in both the cases, okay. Now going back to the front end, okay, then what you can do, you can just go inside your source directory. Now first of all we need to go inside layout, then dashboard and index.js. Now we are basically going to set up event listeners for those two events that we just emitted from our backend, okay. Now we are just going to set up an event listener for this event start chat that we are emitting from our backend, okay. So let me actually do that here. So I'll just say socket.on and then the name of the event, which is start underscore chat, okay. Then we'll be basically receiving some data and then we'll be processing over it, okay, in here. But before that, let me actually place this socket dot off, okay, so that this listener is basically turned off every time this component is going to unmount. So here I'm just going to say socket dot off start underscore chat, like this. Let me also make one correction here. You can actually do this conditionally because we are creating this socket instance only after the user is logged in, okay. So that is why I'm just going to place that question mark over there in order to make it conditional, okay. Then after that, let's actually see what we are going to do inside this start underscore chat, okay. So after we receive this data here, okay, then we are first of all going to console log that, okay. So I'm just going to write here console.log data, okay. And if you just want to know how this data is going to look like, you can go back to your backend, open up the models folder and go to one-to-one message. This is going to be basically a document or a record that you can say in this format. That means it is going to have this property participants, which will be an array, okay. And this is actually going to contain two users, not just their IDs but to users document, okay. Then it is also going to have this messages array, okay. For now it's going to be empty because we haven't basically sent any messages yet, okay. So that's how our data is going to look like. Then what we are first of all going to do here is we'll check if the conversation or the one-to-one message document that we are receiving is already present in our Redux store or not. So what I'm basically trying to say is that if you go back to your Redux slices and conversation.js, okay, then you can see that we are already storing a list of conversations, okay, here inside this field. And this is happening when our app is basically getting loaded, or you can say this screen is getting loaded and this component is rendering, okay. So when this component, you can see, is going to render, then we are basically emitting an event, okay. And after that event is emitted, we are basically getting a list of all the conversations and then we are basically storing that in our Redux store inside this conversation direct chat, okay. So that's how the flow is working right now. So that is why we are basically going to check if the conversation that we just received is already existing in our store or not, okay. So for that we can just simply write const existing conversation is equal to, okay, then we'll have to basically get this conversations here, okay, from our Redux store. So let me actually do that here. At the top of this component, I'm just going to write const conversations is equal to, then I'm going to basically make use of this use selector. Okay, we can simply pass this callback, get our state, and say that we want access to state dot conversation dot direct chat. Okay, so direct chat is basically, you can say, an object, okay, which is going to contain this property. So we have just destructured it over here. We are basically accessing that conversations list here. Okay, then I'm just going to use this find method here. Okay, now what this find method is going to do, it is basically going to loop over every element that is contained inside this list. Then we are simply going to check a condition over here. Okay, I'm just going to say el dot id is equal to data dot underscore id. Please remember that each element inside this conversation is going to have a property called id. Okay, and that is the object id, okay, from the mongoose document. And since this data is one conversation, so it is also going to have one of its own underscore id, or you can say mongoose document id. So we are just comparing those. If it matches, okay, then that means there is already an existing conversation. So in case this statement returns true, then that means there is an existing conversation. Okay, so based on that, we are going to basically emit two different actions from here. Okay, so let me actually write that here so that you can get a better understanding of it. So I'm just going to use this if else statement here. Okay, now the condition inside this if statement is going to be this existing conversation. So the end result of this thing, okay, is going to be a single document. Okay, otherwise it's going to be null. So if there is any document, okay, any conversation which is actually matching with the one that we received here, then it is going to return that conversation, otherwise this is going to be null. So in case this existing conversation is not null, that means we already have that conversation. Okay, that means that is already present in our list. Okay, so we just need to update that. Okay, so here I'm just going to dispatch this action called update direct conversation, like this. Okay, so we haven't actually created this action yet, but we are going to do that shortly. And payload that will be basically passing here, or you can say the arguments that will be passing here, it's just going to be an object with this property conversation, and that conversation is the data that we just received. Okay, here. Now similarly, in the case there is no existing conversation, okay, then what we are going to do, we are simply then going to add a new conversation to the list. Okay, so here I'm just going to write this comment. First of all, add direct conversation. Okay, that means add one element to that direct chat dot conversations list. Okay, so here again we'll be dispatching some action, and this time we are going to do this add direct conversation. Okay, and once again we haven't basically created this action yet, we are going to do that right now. Okay, so the payload that will be passing here is going to remain the same, like this. Okay, and one more thing, so after you basically emit that event start conversation, that particular conversation is also going to be selected. Okay, that chat should load up here, okay, in the right section. So that is why we are also going to emit one more action from here. Okay, and that will be emitted in both cases. Okay, whether there is an existing conversation or not, and this is going to be select conversation. Okay, we have already discussed this, okay, in a previous video, so you can just refer back to that if you want to basically recap this one. So in this case we are just going to emit, in this case we are just going to pass this room id, or you can say the id of a particular conversation. Okay, and that can be simply, we can simply get that by using this property data dot underscore id, like this. So let's now actually focus on building these two, update direct conversation and add direct conversation. Okay, so let's now actually handle these two actions. Okay, so for that, again we'll need to move inside our conversation.js slice. Okay, then as you can see, we created this fetch direct conversation reducer in the last video. Okay, similarly we are going to need to create two more reducers here. One is for updating and one is for adding new conversation. Okay, so define those here. Okay, then we are going to talk about how the logic is going to work in this case. So for update direct conversation, okay, let's just define it like this, and then we'll be basically getting our state and action. Okay, then similarly we are going to define one more reducer here, which will be for add direct conversation. Okay, like this, will have access to our state and action. Then in case of update, what we are simply going to do, let me just write it here. Okay, so as you can see, we have a list, okay, that we want to basically update. So what is basically going to happen, we'll take that list, okay, then we'll map over it like this. Okay, then we'll basically get access to each of its element. Then we are simply going to check that the id of this element, okay, is basically equal to whatever data. Let's assume we have some data that we want to, data is going to basically be an object, okay, similar to element of this list. So we are going to check if any element's id is equal to data dot underscore id. Okay, in that case we are going to return that data, that means the new record. Otherwise we are going to return the normal record el. Okay, so that's how our list is going to update. Then the result of this, we are simply going to store that again inside that list. So this is the concept that we'll be using here. But in case of add, as you can simply see, what we are going to do, we have again that list. Okay, so this is just an example, but what we are going to do, we'll simply post the new record here. Okay, so I'll just write it like this. So I hope this is clear now. So let's actually write it. Okay, so here again, first of all, I'm going to get the conversation document from this action payload. Okay, so I'm just going to write this const this conversation is equal to action dot payload dot conversation. Okay, after that, what we are going to do, as I have just explained, we are going to map over that list of conversation, and the final result is also going to be stored inside our that list. Okay, so for that we'll have to write it like this: state dot direct chat dot conversation is equal to state dot direct chat dot conversations. Okay, then we are simply going to map over it. Okay, so I'll get access to each of its element. Okay, then what we are going to do, we'll first of all have to check a condition here. Okay, and then based on that we'll be returning two different things from here. So as I just explained to you in this example, okay, what we are simply going to do, let me just write it here. So we'll be again taking two cases here. Okay, one in which the condition gets satisfied and the other in which the condition is not satisfied. So in the if case, we are going to just take the id of each element. Okay, and then we'll compare it against the id of this conversation. So I'll just write it like this. So what this statement is saying, that if the id of this element is not matching with the conversation's id, that means this conversation is not the same as this element. So in this case we are just going to return that element directly. Okay, but in the other case we are going to actually return this conversation. Okay, so for that we can't just simply return this conversation because the format of data has to be changed. Okay, so that is why we are first of all going to get the user out of this conversation. So I'll just write this conversation dot participants. Okay, and this is a list. I just need one of the two participants. Okay, that means the other user except myself. Okay, so here I'm just going to basically get each of those two elements one by one. Okay, then what I'll just say, I'll just compare the underscore id property. Okay, so first of all I'm just going to make sure that it's in the string format. Then I'll just check if it's not equal to user id, that means the currently logged in user, then that means this is the user. Okay, the other user that we are communicating to. So we can basically use this user's name, email, okay, image, in order to basically build another conversations card component. Okay, so here I'm then just going to return an object. Okay, and that object is going to have the format in which I just also explained this in the earlier video. So it's going to have a id property, and this id is actually going to belong to the conversation. Okay, so for that purpose we are going to write here underscore id. Okay, like this. Then for the user underscore id, okay, this is going to be the user's id, so we'll just say user dot underscore id. Similarly, we are going to have the user's name, well, if the user is online, user's image, message, last, okay, last message, and the time stamp of the last message, unread count, and if the chat is pinned or not. So I'm just all, I have already explained all these things, okay, in the previous video as well. So I'm just going to basically copy and paste that here like this. So I don't think there is any doubt here. Okay, because I've explained this in the simplest terms possible. But if you still have any doubt, You can just ask all of that in the comments, or you can also join our Discord server. Okay, after this we have to basically create our next reducer here, which is to add direct conversation to the list of conversations. Okay, so here again what we are going to do will be simply repeating the same process. Okay, but instead of basically mapping over it, okay, so let me actually correct this here. It has to be map method. Okay, we cannot basically just directly call conversation, that is actually wrong. So we'll have to add this dot map here. Okay, then after that, inside this add direct conversation, we are simply first of all going to again get that conversation inside this variable, inside this constant. Okay, then after that we'll have to basically search for the user. Okay, and that can also be done in the similar manner like this. Okay, so here I'm just going to write it like this. So this is how we'll get our user. Okay, so once that is done, what we can simply do is we can write state dot direct chat dot conversations. Okay, then call this push method here. Okay, and pass an object, okay, with the appropriate properties. So we can just use this format here. Okay, so id is going to be this conversation dot underscore id, user id. Okay, all of these properties are going to be like this. Now this thing is also done. Okay, we can just save it here. Then the next thing that is remaining is to basically create actions for this. Okay, and that is actually going to be pretty much similar to what we did with fetch direct conversation. So I'm just going to copy and paste that for 2 times, and then I'll make some changes here. So instead of fetch direct conversations, it is going to be add direct conversations. Okay, add direct conversation basically because it's going to be a single document. Okay, then here we are going to basically get this property conversation. Okay, and we'll be passing it to the reducer. So it will be add direct conversation. Again, make sure that the name is actually exactly same as we have defined here. Okay, similarly for updating, okay, I'm going to make some changes here as well. So I'll just say update direct conversation. We'll get conversation as a inside our argument. Okay, then here also in place of reducer I'll just say update direct conversation. Okay, so after making these changes, we have actually created our reducers as well as actions. So I'm just going to save this file for now. Okay, then you can just go inside this index.js file and import these two actions that we just created. So now let me just confirm one last thing. Okay, after that we are done with this friend functionality. Okay, and we are basically now going to see how to send one-to-one message. Okay, that I just demonstrated at the start of this video. So let me just go inside this auth.js file. Okay, and what I want to make sure is that I told you in a previous video that while logging in the user, we are simply storing that user's ID, okay, in our local storage. And that same thing has to be done after the user signs up and verifies their email. So we'll have to basically search for this verify email. Okay, and you can see we are already storing the user's ID in our local storage after the user signs up. And we'll also have to do one more thing, like when the user is going to log out of our application, then we are also removing the users underscore id from here. So that's all I wanted to confirm here. Okay, so we have already done that. That means we are done with our friends functionality overall. Okay, now I've just closed all of my open editors and also collapsed my files and folders. Okay, then what we are simply going to do here, we are going to first of all start with our backend. Okay, in order to implement that chat functionality. So we'll be working on this text message. Okay, so let's actually see how we are going to write the logic here that we just documented in a previous video. Okay, so let's now see how we are going to handle text and link messaging from our backend. Okay, so the first thing that we'll have to basically implement here is a listener to get all of the messages for a particular conversation. So we can just simply write it like this, socket.on. Okay, and then get underscore messages. This is the event that is going to be emitted from our client side. Okay, then we'll be basically getting our data, or you can say payload here. Okay, then as a second argument we'll also get some callback, which is going to be needed to call here. Okay, and then we'll be passing a list of messages as an argument to this callback. Now this data is basically going to contain only the conversation underscore id property, which is going to tell us for which conversation we want to get messages. Okay, and since we are going to make a MongoDB query here, which is an asynchronous operation. So that is why I'm going to mark it as async. Okay, then let's actually write our query here. So I'll just say await. Okay, then on this model one-to-one message, I'll just say find by ID. Okay, then the ID is going to be coming from data dot conversation underscore ID, as I just explained to you. Then we can simply get this messages property only from this document, okay, by calling this select method and passing this messages over there. Then since this is going to be just a single document in object format, so in order to basically get this messages property out of it, I can just destructure that. Okay, then in order to pass this messages, or you can say a list of messages to our client side, we can make use of this callback. Now as an argument, we are going to just simply pass this list of messages. So that's the flow that we are going to basically execute whenever someone is going to emit this event from their client side, get messages. Okay, then after that, for exchanging messages, we'll have to basically first of all decide in which format we are going to get the data. So in the last video we discussed that the data that we'll be getting for each message will be in this format. This is going to contain the properties like to and from, but instead of this text, okay, I've decided to basically send a property with this name message, okay, which is going to be the content of the message actually. After that, we'll also get this property called conversation ID, okay, which is basically going to tell us for which conversation we are basically trying to send this message. Okay, and after that, we are also going to get one more property called type. Okay, since the message can be of different type, it can be either text, link, document, okay, or media. So that is why we are going to get this property type, which is going to be decided from our client side. Then let's actually destructure all of these properties from data here. Okay, so I'm just going to copy it from there and paste it like this. Then I'll just say that it is going to be coming from this data property. And the next thing that we have to do here is to construct a new message, okay, out of these properties. So I'll just say, as you can see in the inside this one-to-one message schema, for each message there is going to be this blueprint, you can say. That means each message is going to have these properties. So since we are basically exchanging text or link messages, so this file property is not of use right now. Okay, so we are going to define all of these properties except this file properties. So here I'm just going to say to, from, type. Okay, then for this created at, this is just going to be the current timestamp, since we have already defined a default value for this. So even if we don't actually put it here, okay, like created at and then the value date dot now, it is automatically going to be added to that message. Okay, but since we have already defined its default value, so I'm just going to omit that from here. Then for the text property, we can simply use this message. Okay, so now after this new message has been defined, what we can simply do is we can fetch the conversation document. Okay, so I'll just write this query one-to-one message dot find by ID. Okay, since we already have the conversation ID here, as you can see, conversation underscore ID, so I'm just going to pass that here. And in order to resolve this error, what it's basically saying is that this function is not asynchronous, but we are performing some asynchronous task here. So for that, I'm just going to mark this function as async. Okay, then after we have this basically chat document, you can say, so I'm just going to call it chat. Okay, like this. What we can simply do is we can access that property messages, or you can say access that list of messages here like this. And in order to post a new message, we can use this push method. Okay, so I'm just going to pass this new message over there. And then the last step is to basically save these changes or persist these changes into our database. So for that, I can just simply again write this query chat dot and then use this save method here. Okay, here s is going to be small. Okay, please make sure that you don't do any mistake over there. Okay, let me actually move this comment before this line. Okay, now it's looking better. And then the last step remaining here is to basically emit event to our end users. Okay, so I have decided to basically send one single event to both of the user, not two different messages. Okay, so I'm just going to basically emit this event with the name of new underscore message to both sender and recipient. Now how we can basically do that? We can actually create a room for these users, okay, and then we can subscribe both of these, or you can say join both of these to that room, okay. And if we then emit any event to the users of that room, then all of the users are going to basically get that. But we are not going to follow that approach right now. We are going to basically use their socket id and emit individual events. But in the next video we'll see how we can basically create a room, okay, and then emit event to all of the users present over there. So for now I'm just going to call this io.to method. Then as you already know from a previous video, we discussed that we'll have to basically give the socket id here, okay, inside this too. So in order to basically get that socket id, we'll first need access to the user's document. And to do that, what we are going to do, I'm just going to fetch the user's document using their id, okay. So again we'll have to make some query here. So I'll just use this user model, and on this I'm just going to say find by id and then pass the id of the user like this. Similarly, for the sender of this message, we can just modify this query, okay, like this. So after this is done, what we can simply do, to underscore user dot socket underscore id like this, and then call the emit method, okay, and then the name of the event that we want to emit, and that is obviously new underscore message. And then the payload that we are going to send, that will have this property conversation underscore id, which is going to tell our client side for which conversation this new message is coming, because at a time user can be communicating to many different users, okay. So after that we also need to basically send the message. So for that we can just simply pass this property with the name of message and the value of new underscore message. And in order to basically, since we are actually not going to have that created at property here, okay, if we are using this new underscore message, so what I'm going to do, I'll also add that created underscore add property here, and the value for that is going to be date dot now like this, okay. Now simply we'll have to basically repeat the same process for our sender of this message. So I'm just going to copy that and modify it like this, okay. So I hope that is very clear to you. So this is how we are going to handle messages on our backend, okay. In the next video we'll see how to handle this on our client side as well. So that's it for this video. If you have any doubts, or if you want to basically leave any feedback, you can post that in the comment section, okay. I'll be replying to those comments as soon as possible. Also you can join our discord channel if you haven't joined that yet, okay. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already.